The debate on whether and how to pay student athletes certainly accelerated dramatically this week, with both the Supreme Court and the U.S. Senate signaling that they plan to weigh in. This comes as college sports struggled on whether to even play games during the pandemic. Quick Take's chief correspondent, Jason Kelly, joins us now from New York with the latest. Hey, Jason, so break it down for us here. What exactly is the Supreme Court going to review?
Well, it's incredible, Tim. I mean, over the course of a couple days, this went from being relatively, pun intended, sort of academic, and you had sort of people weighing in, to the Supreme Court taking it up, and as you say, the U.S. Senate introducing a bill. Let's start with the Supreme Court. Basically, the NCAA kicked up a case that had been decided by the Ninth Circuit around whether athletes can be paid. The NCAA basically arguing that this would undermine 100 years of history and start to blur the line, really meaningfully blur the line between amateur and professional athletes. Now, the other side of the argument, the athletes are basically saying, good, yeah, we need to do that. So it'll be interesting to see. The Supreme Court, I was talking to somebody earlier who mentioned the Supreme Court has not really taken this up since the mid-'80s, so maybe a long overdue reconsideration given how much money, as you well know, flows through college sports, especially big-time college football and basketball.
Okay, so that's where the Supreme Court comes into it and where the legality of this comes into it. What about the group of senators who have decided also to look at college athlete compensation? How does that play into this?
Well, this is really actually very fascinating to me as someone who's followed this pretty closely. I've talked to a lot of former college athletes. I've talked to folks who have studied this, and no less than Cory Booker, himself a former college athlete. He played football at Stanford. He's one of the sponsors of this bill. They basically are introducing this sweeping college athlete Bill of Rights, essentially, that would allow college athletes to get paid. It would give them much more of a say in basically their own brand in many ways. And this is coming at a time where you have state legislatures weighing in, California most notably, around this notion, and this is a term of art, name, image, and likeness, and whether student athletes can be compensated for that. The NCAA is struggling with where to go next, but it may come down to federal law and the federal judiciary in the guise of the Supreme Court very soon as to where the NCAA can and can't go.
So, Jason, this is the big question, though, that I have. I mean, does this change the fact that college athletes, they're not currently paid right now? Does it mean that they could start getting paid anytime soon?
I think it does. I think it's hard to imagine that this doesn't lead to some alteration of how we look at college sports. And again, we paint a broad brush, but what we're really talking about, Tim, is, Power 5 college football, those, multi-$100 million programs that generate so much money, this college Bill of Rights that the senators are introducing, that calls for basically those schools to split evenly with the athletes the revenue they bring in. That would fundamentally change the business model. And then there's this whole other question of the funding of non-big-time revenue sports, swimming and golf and tennis and lacrosse.
Right, not bringing in the big bucks.
How does that all play out? Exactly. So you are potentially looking at, over the next couple of years, the entire business model of college sports being upended.
How much money are we talking about here, Jason? We hear about some of the salaries for these football coaches at the big schools, and they are just mind-boggling. But the argument is always, hey, they bring in a lot of revenue for the school, and then the players don't end up getting that revenue. How much money are we talking here?
It depends on the school, and that's one of the tricky things here, Tim, as you know, is that, from school to school, if you're talking about an SEC, a Southeastern Conference school, if you're talking about a Big Ten school, you're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars when it comes to the football program and the big-time basketball programs. So that's on the high end for sure, and there are only certain categories of athletes, those that may end up going pro, that really, may, quote-unquote, deserve to be compensated at a very high level. Then again, there is this imbalance. I had a conversation back in September with Amani Toomer. You may remember him. He played for the Giants. He played at the University of Michigan. And he pointed out to me and my colleagues on the Business of Sports show that back in the 90s when he was playing at Michigan, his coach was getting $500,000 from Nike. And Amani Toomer, that meant he had to wear Nike shoes to the point where he couldn't tape his shoes the way he wanted to because it would cover the swoosh.
And he got nothing.
And he got nothing. He got zero.
Right. Jason, I just want to end with talking about the pandemic here and how this has accelerated the conversation around athletes, student athletes being compensated. Take us through what's happened over the last few months and the conversation around athletes playing in the midst of this pandemic.
Yeah, it's a great question because we have heard a lot about player safety. College football, big-time college football has pressed ahead. As you know, we're going to get some semblance of a college football playoff. And the college football playoff alone is such a fascinating thing to study because the CFP, that vaunted Final Four that we pay so much attention to, none of that money actually accrues to the NCAA. Doesn't that blow your mind?
Yeah.
And so the system, the Knight Commission on Intercollegiate Athletics has studied this. They have some bold proposals, and it all goes to this notion that you just sort of feel something in the air is going to change. And by most accounts, it probably should.
Quick Take's chief correspondent, Jason Kelly. Jason, it is always such a treat to have you on Quick Take. Thanks so much for your time this
The biggest stories the moment they happen from around the globe. Subscribe to Bloomberg Quick Take now for insight in an instant.